everybody. Welcome back to the latest edition of Terrace Talk. Disappointment at Hillsborough for Norwich City last night, of course, conceding 2 relatively late goals, which makes Saturday's trip to Deepdale all the bigger. Delighted to be joined by Tom, as usual, for your preview there ahead of the long trip. Tom, a huge win, though, for North End last night. Came from 1-0 behind against Huddersfield to win 4-1. What's the mood, I suppose, around Deepdale? I'd imagine it's relatively positive after a couple of sort of more sort of poor results, I suppose, in the recent games before that.
Yeah, it was a strange game, really, where I suppose from a Norwich perspective, you'll finish your game and then look and see North End won 4-1. You think, all right, this must be a team banging form. They're coming into it. It was a strange one where for a big chunk of the game, North End found it probably difficult. They were just having to work hard and keep themselves not necessarily in the game, because I don't feel like Huddersfield were particularly that much of a threat, but it didn't necessarily look like they were going to run away 4-1 winners. Then obviously Milutin Osmaic comes off the bench and scores 3 in 7 minutes, and it completely changes the game. I suppose that's kind of the nature of the Championship, is how unpredictable things can be. But yeah, the mood generally is pretty good. I mean, they're still in with a chance, which the majority of the division can't say. Obviously, you'd like to be in a position where it's sort of in your own hands, in the sense that if they beat Norwich and pick up results elsewhere, they're probably going to be in there. So yeah, it could be a lot worse, especially for a team like North End, who don't have the budget to match the majority of the division, yet still put up a fight against everyone, really.
Yeah, what the performance has been like since we last met. I know kind of we spoke there in December. Performances have been poor, results have been poor. I know sort of the North End fans maybe had a little bit of a grudge against Ryan Lowe, maybe felt it sort of was a time for a change. He seems to have got you going a little bit again. I mean, February, March has been a relatively positive run of form. You've kept yourself in and around the top 6, as you mentioned. So, I mean, yeah, what have the kind of performance levels been like?
Yeah, performances have definitely improved. There's certain people that you're never going to convert, but Ryan Lowe has definitely won back a portion of the fan base, and has definitely at least got critics off his back. They're willing to let him obviously keep going and aren't complaining at the moment. I mean, the difficulty that North End had is I suppose you look at it and you think of how poor that run of form was. Had they picked up literally a handful more points during that period of time, they're probably sitting in 6th now instead. But in saying that, I'm sure, Coventry had a terrible start to the season. They could easily be saying something similar, who are sat right now on the same points as North End. So yeah, it's one of them, I suppose. I suppose every team is going to go through that sort of spell. It just seemed to be that North End's all came at once after such a really good start to the season when they picked up so many wins. Performances have picked up. I don't think it was a coincidence that introducing the likes of Mas Frokjar back into the side, who is so technically gifted, increased, the positivity of results. Emil Rees coming back into the side after a long-term injury, and finding the back of the net relatively quickly has helped massively as well. He's, North End's chief goal threat, really, and has been in pretty good form as well. And now Osmaic getting a hat-trick. You'd like to think he's in form. Will Keane's a really good foil and has been kind of all season. So they've got good options there, especially if you can keep Mas Frokjar on the pitch and keep him creating things. You've got some good potential there.
Yeah, Ryan Lowe's already sort of been quoted, sort of mentioned how big a game it is there on Saturday. 2 sides, of course, hoping to be in the top 6 come the final whistle on the final day. How big a game do you think this is? Is it bigger for North End, maybe, given kind of the relative points gap to Norwich? If Norwich win, does that probably end any top 6 hopes for the rest of the season?
Until it's mathematically impossible, I don't think it necessarily ends it, because you could never really say never. But realistically, when it goes to 8 points behind with a far inferior goal difference, it looks very tricky, especially when at that point there's only 4 games for North End, 3 if you take out the game in hand that they have on most of the division with the Southampton game, who obviously are playing for a lot themselves as well. So I think this is huge for North End in that the running isn't easy, and they have to make up that ground, and that ground is only has only got larger recently, and they're facing a Norwich team in pretty good form that are, the pace setters at the moment.
Do you think it'd be deemed a positive season, even if North End do fall short of the top 6? I know in recent times, this stage of the season's maybe been a bit quiet for North End. Their season's kind of been done. This time they've got that opportunity. Will the fans still be willing to give Ryan Lowe maybe next season if it doesn't turn out in the top 6?
Probably. I think North End are generally one of the teams kind of chasing towards the end of a season, but tail away. And potentially around this sort of time, 5-6 games to go, that they can sort of fade away. There's only been a couple of seasons where I remember one under Alex Neil where they were one of only 2 teams that were still in the race for the top 6 on the last day. It rarely gets kind of that far for North End. It normally gets around here. I think it was last year where they started losing to teams like Swansea, who were kind of where they are now, lowerish mid-table, and things just seem to fall apart in that final 6 games. I think, given that it's an improvement on the position last year, as things stand, and they look likely to better the points tally, I think it will appease certain areas of the fan base, but there will always be certain areas of the fan base that are ambitious too and want to push on and will not accept kind of North End constantly being this sort of mid-table side that in the end don't really trouble the playoffs, but that's unlikely to change too much without kind of catching lightning in a bottle with the way that the club is run and how close they are to financial fair play and all these sorts of things. So yeah, I think it'll potentially be a little bit mixed, but overall it would still be, you know, a good season on the whole, especially again if you consider the amount of money that is to play for in this division and that you're up against at times.
Yeah, you mentioned a few sort of key men maybe in a previous answer, but who's maybe the one-star player to look out for on Saturday? I know you mentioned Will Keane, 13 goal contributions in sort of terms of goals. I don't know, I can't remember what his assist tally is. Emil Rees has been injured for a lot of the season, but 6 goals as well. There's kind of a couple of strikers there. You mentioned Osmajic at a hat-trick last night. Are those kind of options that maybe Norwich fans should fit?
Yeah, on their day, they're really good players. I think Mas Frokjar, to me, stands out technically as the best player at North End. He's the best, technically gifted. He is probably one of the best I've seen at North End for a really long time, and just how easy everything looks to him. He carries the ball really well. He's a type of sort of nonchalant player. He wears his socks really low, and that genuine number 10 that just gets a really good weight of pass and just always seems to be kind of that final ball before a goal. I think it'd be massively important if Alan Brown can start the game. He came on in midweek and did really well. He's been fantastic this season, and they've missed him massively. And I think it's also worth making a note of Ali McCann, who, I mean, at the weekend was playing alongside a centre-back in the middle of midfield and has been absolutely fantastic covering that ground, and did the same in midweek. He's been absolutely brilliant as well lately. Maybe a less flashy player than the likes of Frokjar and Osmajic and Keane and Rees, who are getting the goals and the assists, but Brown and McCann are massively important. And I think if you're going to beat Norwich and close that gap, you're going to need 5-6 players to really turn up on the day at least.
Yeah, there's a few connections between the two sides. One I want to sort of touch on, Robbie Brady, a man that was bought for big money for Norwich a few years back and sold for good money as well. North End now for a couple of seasons, 32 years of age now, but he seems to be still a regular feature in this North End side. What have you made of his performances this season?
Yeah, he's had his critics at times. There's been times where he has struggled, times where he's not really been in the team too much. But of late, he's come in and has been brilliant. He's been playing kind of right wing back, and he's been really, really good. North End have kind of one recognised right wing back in Brad Potts, who's currently injured, and Brady's come in lately, been given the armband, and he's been absolutely brilliant. He was probably in for running of man of the match in midweek before Osmajic comes in and knocks 3 in 7 minutes. But yeah, he's been really good lately, and it's good to see because, like I say, at times he's had his critics, and you know he's a really good professional. You can kind of see how switched on he is at times and the pace that he likes to kind of pass the ball and move sharply and little bits like that, but it's not always come off for him, and it's good to see him now in form.
In terms of the approach, how do you expect North End to set up on Saturday? Do they kind of have a set formation, a set kind of team that they like to approach it in terms of Ryan Lowe, or can you see maybe there being more sort of pragmatic approach, I suppose, and some changes?
Yeah, it's always a 3-5-2 or a kind of variation thereof. The Watford, it was kind of almost a 3-4-3, 3-4-2-1 with a centre back in midfield and went really defensive. I don't expect to see that against Norwich, especially at home. I think the Watford one was just to kind of make sure they keep the pace. And now I think they need to come out and try and get a win. I'd expect either a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-2-1, depending on how many forwards he wants to go with. But it's always going to be kind of a 3-back formation and then go from there. I think how the game unfolds might dictate a little bit on how North End approach it. But you'd like to think at home that they'll kind of try and at least come out and set the tone and kind of go from there.
What's the atmosphere been like at Deepdale this season? I remember being there for the reverse fixture last season, sort of a 4-0 victory for Norwich. It was a little bit toxic in areas, maybe a lot of vented frustration, but 7th in the home form table in the Championship, 37 points picked up at home. Have you seen kind of an improvement in terms of the noise levels and the fan feeling?
Yeah, North End knew it had been an issue for a little while, the home form, and they knew they needed to pick that up. And they started off really well. Obviously, they started off as a whole really well this season, and that improved a lot this season. And North End are a fan base that will back their side. And I've seen posts on social media already getting ready for the game and trying to get everyone wearing white. Little bits like that where they know they are needed. And they will be there in numbers and in a good voice. They've just had the Gentry Day, which is something unique to Preston, where we pay respects to those that have been lost over the last year. And that's something that really brings the fan base together. And then you come into like a good win against Huddersfield, 4-1, and then this huge game against Norwich. I think the fans, will be really up for it.
Have you seen much of Norwich via the TV or any other sort of opportunities this season? I know you weren't at Carrow Road, so it'd probably have to be through Sky. Obviously, the big game against Ipswich. Did you manage to tune into that?
Yeah, I did. This probably won't go down well, but I was a bit quite surprised with how well Norwich did. You see Ipswich kind of all conquering and stuff, and they really took the game to them. It shows, what a good job has been done at the moment, and kind of the form that they're in. Really, even a side like Ipswich, who are getting all applauded, just couldn't stop them. So I think it shows what a tough kind of test it'll be for North End. And David Wagner's won promotion from this division before, especially through the playoffs. So it looks like it's all kind of setting up quite nicely for Norwich at the moment.
Yeah, it is. We're not going to reflect too much on the reverse game, a 0-0 draw. Not really much happened, but with all that, I suppose, do you expect a different game on Saturday from that one? Two sides that are sort of now in a position where they can look and maybe see the top 6 in their sights. Norwich still looking to try and hold on to that position that they hold at the moment. So, yeah, more of an attacking game, do you think, on Saturday?
I think definitely from North End, because North End need to close that gap. I think Norwich can afford not to. If it goes and it's dead boring, it's a 0-0 and everyone's falling asleep, that won't bother Norwich in the slightest. They've kept distance from one of the chasing pack, and they've still got games in hand on Coventry. They've still got games to play, for everybody else. So, yeah, I think Norwich can afford for it to be boring. North End can't. I think they have to be more attacking. So it depends on who's able to kind of control the game, who's able to control the tempo. If Norwich are able to do that, I think it might be they'll try and drag things out and slow things down. I think if it's the other way and North End are able to get on top, able to press high and get the fans involved, I think it might be quite an aggressive game. Yeah,
with all that we've spoken about, going to push you for a score prediction, Tom. Yeah, I think it's been 5 draws in the last 11 meetings, 2 North End victories. With all that, how do you see this game going?
I'll go 1-0 North End, because otherwise I'd have gone 2-1, but whether it's going to be kind of that open for 3 goals on a day like Saturday, where it's probably going to be grim weather, it's probably going to be a really hard sort of game where it's going to be really close and there's so much to play for. So I'll hope that North End manage to nick it.
Yeah, I can see Norwich, I suppose, sort of cursing themselves after the poor sort of last 15 minutes. They need a response. Certainly all set up for a really big game. Yeah, huge game for both sides on Saturday. Looking forward to it. Of course, the really, really, really long trip to Deepdale. Not that we're sort of not used to that as Norwich fans. Tom, are you going to be there on Saturday?
No, unfortunately. I can say unfortunately because she's not going to watch it, but it's my girlfriend's anniversary on Saturday, so I'm in the lakes, unfortunately. So I'll be like checking my phone constantly. I'll be that person that's always on the phone. And yeah, my dad will be giving me updates from Deepdale instead because he gets to go, but I can't.
Yeah, congratulations, of course. Yeah, I'm sure it's all set up for a really big game. Looking forward to it. Of course, we'll be speaking to David Wagner tomorrow, so all the team news updates from our end will be there. You can get that on the Pink 'Un YouTube channel. The Pink 'Un Plus app subscription offer is still just about available. £3 for 3 months. Why not go and check that out? I say huge game. Looking forward to it. 4 games to go. Can Norwich City secure, a really big victory that maybe could go a long way to clinching a really, really, hopefully, 3 points towards a playoff place?